When humans first populated North America and how they arrived has long been a matter of spirited debate.
In the late 1940s, a Danish archaeologist named Helge Larsen was excavating a remote cave in Alaska when he uncovered 40 ancient human skeletons. When these remains were tested using modern laboratory analysis, they turned out to be more than 14,000 years old. So, who were these people? And where had they come from? Because, according to the widely accepted story, humans weren't supposed to be living in this part of North America at that time. For more than 60 years, no one had an answer. Then, in 2016, scientists used modern DNA analysis to take another look at the remains, and what they found was astonishing. The bones belonged to a population of people that no one even knew had ever existed. So, how did these mysterious people reach Alaska thousands of years before anyone thought possible? And why is their discovery completely rewriting the timeline of the first Americans? Let's get into it. The unusual location. But before we can understand this discovery, we first need to understand the place where it was made, and why scientists have been fascinated by it for decades. The place is called Trail Creek Caves. It lies on the Seward Peninsula, right on the western edge of Alaska. This remote corner of Alaska sits closer to Asia than anywhere else in North America. In fact, on a clear day, you can stand on the mountain cliff and look across the Bering Strait toward Russia. Today, these two continents are separated by 53 miles of ocean. But thousands of years ago, these two pieces of land were connected. See, the thing is, during the last ice age, sea levels were more than 300 feet lower than they are today. This created a vast stretch of land that connected Asia and North America. Scientists call this lost land Beringia. It wasn't just a narrow bridge that people crossed in a few days. It was an enormous landscape, stretching nearly 1,000 miles from north to south at its widest point and covering an area almost the size of Australia. For thousands of years, mammoths, bison, horses, and other Ice Age animals roamed across its open grasslands. Eventually, humans also used this land bridge to reach the New World. But crossing Beringia wasn't easy. Humans needed places where they could stop, hunt animals, and shelter from the harsh Arctic climate. Trail Creek offered exactly that. Flowing through the valley below was a reliable source of fresh water. The surrounding landscape was rich with wildlife, while the limestone caves provided natural shelter from freezing winds and harsh weather. It's easy to imagine why people would have stopped here, and over thousands of years, they left behind traces of their lives. However, no one realized that humans had once occupied these caves until 1928. That year, two residents from the nearby village of Deering, Taylor Moto and Alfred Carman, stumbled upon the caves while exploring the area. As they looked around, they noticed ancient stone points scattered across the cave floor. They had no idea what they had found, but those few artifacts were enough to catch the attention of scientists. About 20 years later, geologist David Hopkins visited the site for the first scientific investigation. His initial surveys revealed deep, undisturbed Ice Age deposits inside the caves. It was the first real indication that Trail Creek Caves might be preserving something extraordinary. That discovery was enough to launch a full archaeological excavation, and what researchers uncovered over the next few years would rewrite the history of the first Americans. The excavation, by the late 1940s, scientists knew Trail Creek Caves deserved a closer look. So in 1949, Danish archaeologist Helge Larsen traveled to the remote caves with a small team and began excavating the cave floor. At first, they expected to find a few ancient tools and animal bones. Instead, every layer they uncovered revealed something older than the last. They found stone tools, ivory artifacts, the bones of mammoths, bison, and caribou. Evidence that people had lived here while this region was still part of the lost land of Beringia. Meanwhile, as the researchers continued the excavation, they found something astonishing. Mixed among the Ice Age remains were human bones. Over the course of the excavations, Larsen's team recovered the remains of more than 40 individuals, along with over 100,000 artifacts. It was one of the richest Ice Age archaeological discoveries ever made in Alaska. Larsen and his team carefully collected every bone and artifact, packed them into crates, and shipped the entire collection to the National Museum of Denmark in Copenhagen. Now, this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. After this remarkable discovery, the investigation seemed to hit a dead end. Not because the mystery had been solved, but because science had reached its limits. Radiocarbon dating was still in its early years, and the idea of recovering DNA from ancient bones sounded more like science fiction than real science, so the bones were measured, photographed, catalogued, and placed inside museum drawers. Over the next few decades, a few researchers examined these remains, but most of the collection remained untouched. As the decades passed, the archaeologists who had uncovered the bones grew old. Some passed away. Meanwhile, the collection sat quietly in storage, waiting for the technology that would finally reveal the stories of these remains. The DNA analysis. More than 60 years after the bones were first discovered, advances in DNA technology finally gave scientists a way to study them like never before. So in 2016, archaeologist Jeff Rasick from the National Park Service began re-examining Larsen's collection. As he worked through the old boxes, he noticed something that had been sitting there unnoticed for nearly 70 years. A single tooth. It had belonged to a child who was only about a year and a half old when they died. Now, at this point, you might be wondering, why was this tooth so important when there were thousands of other bones and artifacts in the collection? See, the thing is, human teeth are the hardest and best preserved part of the body. Their thick enamel protects them from damage for thousands of years, while the root can preserve ancient DNA long after most bones have broken down. That meant this small tooth had the best chance of revealing something the scientists had never been able to discover before. Who this child was, where they came from, and what their DNA could reveal about the very first people to enter North America. Scientists first began by radiocarbon dating the child's tooth. The results revealed that it was around 9,000 years old. That made it, by a wide margin, the oldest human specimen ever discovered in the North American Arctic. More than twice as old as the next oldest human remains found in the region. But the age wasn't what truly shocked scientists. It was the DNA. When researchers sequenced the genome, they found that it belonged to a mysterious population known as the ancient Beringians. Now, this was a very new population that scientists had identified a few years earlier. In 2013, scientists excavated the remains of 2 infants at Upward Sun River in Alaska's interior. One of the infants preserved a complete ancient genome, revealing a previously unknown branch of the human family tree, the ancient Beringians. Now, the Trail Creek tooth matched that same population. This was an enormous breakthrough. The Trail Creek caves are more than 450 miles from Upward Sun River. Finding the same genetic signature at both sites showed that the ancient Beringians were not a small group living in one isolated location. Instead, they were spread across a much larger part of Alaska than anyone had realized. For the first time, scientists had clear evidence that the ancient Beringians were a real population that had lived in Alaska for thousands of years. However, This discovery created an even bigger problem. According to the leading theory of how the Americas were first settled, these people were never supposed to exist. So, how could an entire population have been missing from the human story for so long? To answer that, we first need to understand the original theory this discovery challenged: the Clovis first theory. For most of the 20th century, there was only one widely accepted explanation for how the first people reached the Americas. It was known as the Clovis first theory. According to this idea, a single group of big game hunters crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Asia around 13,000 years ago. They then traveled south through an ice-free corridor between two massive glaciers before spreading across North and South America. It was a simple story. For more than 50 years, it has been the foundation of nearly every history textbook. And there was good evidence to support it. In the early 1930s, archaeologists discovered distinctive stone spear points near Clovis, New Mexico. The points were found alongside the bones of mammoths and other Ice Age animals, showing that the people who made them hunted these giant creatures. Then, in the 1950s, radiocarbon dating revealed that the spear points were about 13,000 years old. At the time, no older human sites had been discovered anywhere in the Americas. So, to many archaeologists, the conclusion seemed obvious. These had to be the first people to enter the Americas. However, there was one problem. Over time, archaeologists began discovering sites that appeared to be even older than Clovis. And one of those sites was Monte Verde in southern Chile. There, researchers found clear evidence of human occupation dating back about 14,500 years, more than 1,000 years older than the earliest Clovis sites. Then, in 2011, researchers studying the Buttermilk Creek complex in Texas discovered stone tools buried beneath Clovis-era layers. When they dated them, the tools turned out to be nearly 15,500 years old. With every new discovery, the Clovis timeline became harder to defend. Yet each claim faced intense scrutiny. Many scientists argued that the dates were wrong or that the sites had been contaminated. But after years of testing and debate, the evidence continued to hold up. Slowly, the Clovis first theory began to crack. And then, the discovery at Trail Creek Caves pushed it even further. Because the DNA didn't just challenge the old theory, it revealed an entirely different population that the theory couldn't explain. So, if the ancient Beringians aren't part of the Clovis story, then where did they come from? The ancient Beringians. The answer begins with the land they were named after, Beringia. Most people think that it was a narrow land bridge that once connected Asia and North America. But that isn't what it really was. It wasn't just a bridge that people hurried across. It was an enormous homeland. Mammoths, bison, and caribou wandered across its open grasslands. Rivers flowed through its valleys. And wherever the animals went, people followed. For years, archaeologists believed these early people crossed Beringia as quickly as possible before moving into the Americas. But not everyone agreed. Researchers, including archaeologist John Hoffaker from the University of Colorado Boulder, argued that the story was much more complicated. They proposed an idea known as the Beringian standstill hypothesis, first introduced in 1997 and later strengthened in 2007 using DNA from more than 600 living Native Americans. The hypothesis suggested something remarkable. The ancestors of Native Americans didn't simply cross Beringia, they stopped there. For thousands of years, they lived between two massive ice sheets in a landscape that provided food, fresh water, and shelter. Children were born there. Families grew there. Entire generations lived and died there. Only much later, did some of their descendants continue south into the rest of the Americas. However, not everyone left that region. Some stayed behind. Those people would later become known as the ancient Beringians. For them, Beringia wasn't a bridge to somewhere else. It was their home. However, there was one problem with the hypothesis. It explained where these people may have lived, but it still didn't tell scientists where they came from. The missing piece of the puzzle came from another remarkable discovery made just a few years earlier. You might remember that scientists compared the DNA from the Trail Creek tooth with the genome recovered from the 2013 Upward Sun River discovery. That earlier excavation, led by archaeologist Ben Potter and his team from the University of Alaska Fairbanks, would prove to be the key to solving this mystery. During that excavation, the team discovered the skeletons of two infant girls buried beneath the remains of an ancient hearth nearly 11,500 years ago. To understand who these children were, researchers sent a DNA sample to the laboratory of geneticist Eske Willerslev at the University of Copenhagen. When the results were published in the journal Nature on January 3, 2018, they stunned scientists around the world. The DNA didn't match any known Native American population. Instead, it belonged to a completely different branch of the human family tree. Genetic analysis showed that this lineage had split from the ancestors of every other indigenous population in the Americas around 20,000 years ago. But unlike their relatives, they never continued towards the south. They stayed in Alaska. And that is why researchers gave this population a new name, the ancient Beringians. They weren't the direct ancestors of most modern Native Americans. They were a parallel branch, a group of people who remained in Alaska while their cousins spread across the rest of the Americas. The genetic evidence suggests they continued living there for thousands of years. Then, around 6,000 years ago, their genetic signature disappears from the record. Scientists believe another population, the ancestors of today's Athabascan peoples, moved north into the region and either absorbed them or replaced them. After that, the ancient Beringians simply vanished. No living population carries their genetic signature. In many ways, they are a ghost population. Now, you might think this discovery was enough to rewrite history, but it wasn't the only piece of evidence pointing to a much older story of humans in the Americas. The bigger mystery. As scientists continued studying ancient DNA, they found evidence of another population that wasn't supposed to exist. This time, the discovery wasn't made in Alaska. It came from the Amazon rainforest. In 2015, a team of geneticists led by Pontus Skoglund and David Reich studied the DNA of several indigenous groups in Brazil, including the Surui and Caritiana peoples. At first, they were looking for clues about how the first Americans spread across the continent. Instead, they found something completely unexpected. Hidden inside the DNA was a small but consistent genetic signal linking these Amazonian groups to the indigenous peoples of Australia, New Guinea, and the Andaman Islands. That made no sense. These populations were separated by thousands of miles and an entire ocean. No known migration could explain how this genetic connection had formed. Researchers estimated that about 2% of the ancestry of some Amazonian groups today came from this mysterious population. Some scientists believe that if this population had already mixed with other early groups before reaching the Americas, its true genetic contribution may have been much larger. But there was one major problem. No one had ever found their bones. No one had discovered their tools. No one had uncovered their campsites. The only evidence they had ever existed was a tiny statistical trace hidden inside the DNA of people alive today. Researchers gave this mysterious population a name. They called it Population Y, after Ipiquera, the Tupi word for ancestor. Like the ancient Beringians, population Y became another ghost population. A group of people who clearly existed, who left descendants, but then disappeared without leaving a clear population behind. By now, the old picture of the first Americans was becoming impossible to defend. It wasn't just missing a few dates. It was missing entire branches of the human family tree. And then, just when scientists thought the mystery couldn't get any bigger, they found human footprints that appeared to be thousands of years older than anyone thought was possible. The story isn't over yet. In 2021, a team led by Matthew Bennett announced the discovery of ancient human footprints preserved in the dried sediments of White Sands National Park in New Mexico. Radiocarbon dating placed the footprints between 21,000 and 23,000 years old. If those dates are correct, humans were already living in North America thousands of years before the ice-free corridor was thought to have opened. However, not everyone accepted the findings. Some researchers argued that the original plant samples used for dating could have produced older ages. But in 2023, a second study led by Jeff Pigatti used a completely different dating method and reached the same conclusion. Then, in 2025, another study using two independent laboratories again supported the older timeline. The debate isn't over, but the evidence keeps growing. The ancient Beringians, population Y, and now footprints that may be 10,000 years older than the Clovis culture. At the same time, archaeologists continue to uncover new evidence in Alaska. In 2026, researchers announced the discovery of a 14,000-year-old mammoth ivory workshop at a site called Holtzman, near Upward Sun River. Even more fascinating, the tools found there were made using techniques strikingly similar to those later seen in the Clovis culture. Yet the biggest mystery may never be solved. Most of ancient Beringia now lies beneath the Bering Sea, hiding countless campsites, tools, and burials beneath one of the harshest stretches of ocean on Earth. To truly understand who the first Americans were, scientists may have to explore those lost landscapes beneath the sea. But so far, all the evidence points in one clear direction. Humans didn't arrive in the Americas in a single wave, at a single time, following a single path. The story was far more complex than anyone had ever imagined. The discoveries at Trail Creek Caves have shown us one thing. The story of the first people in the Americas isn't as simple as we once believed. It's older, it's more complicated, and there are still many pieces of the puzzle waiting to be found. So now, what do you think happened to the ancient Beringians? Do you think they disappeared forever? Or could their story still be hiding somewhere, waiting to be discovered? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more fascinating discoveries from history and archaeology. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.